the Writing Community Chat Show Advent Christmas Calendar.
Okay, so let's have a little chat then about the pitches that were sent in to us. And thank you for everyone that did send those in. We've only got a few we can read through, so I do apologize if you didn't get feedback on them. But thank you anyway. We will use the ones that we're going to chat about. Any of those tips do apply to us all. So whether we pick something up constructively, that is not negative feedback. It is something constructive, and that can be applied to everybody. So thank you for sending them in, because it will help everyone in the community as well. So Lizzy, do you want to give us the first one?
Sure. I wonder if it's worth saying too that when we are talking about kind of a one-line pitch or a hook, I think there are lots of different kind of phrases for the same thing. It's really that kind of pithy one-liner that sums it up. So the challenge is always brevity, and also getting across the stakes in such a short amount of time. So there were a few that stood out to us. I'm going to read this out. Sorry, I'm looking at a different screen, which is why I'm just turning away from you all. With one touch, Rebecca DeVroe can solve a murder or prevent one. But what happens when her touch tells her she committed one? So Tash and I really liked kind of the setup of this, that statement followed by a question. We felt there was kind of a tension. Obviously, the stakes, we're talking about murder here, the idea that she might have committed a murder. The thing we felt would elevate it even further was just a little bit more detail, because we felt like we weren't entirely sure if this was kind of a magical novel or fantastical, if it was set in this world, and how it works. So I think the challenge with making that one even stronger would be trying to put in more detail without making it too long.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So how do you think that someone could do that? Because that is obviously a chunk already. And then how do you add into that without feeling like you're putting too much in there?
I think it often helps to use one word for a character or to describe. So for example, with one touch, someone, Rebecca DeVroe. So it might be magician. I don't feel like that is the right answer for this one. But there might be a word you could put in there that just adds one word to it, but kind of tells me as a reader or a reviewer or a journalist or whoever I might be, an agent, a little bit more about where this novel sits. So I often think add a word before, maybe it's an age if your book is aimed at children, a 6-year-old girl or 15-year-old girl. Or it might be a profession if you're writing, doctor, someone is doing this. So I would maybe try to add to your characters with just one or two words that clarify them and thus your story.
Fantastic. Tash, any advice on that?
No.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
I'm just trying to think. I think that one in particular was kind of instantly very intriguing.
Okay.
But it's kind of, as Lizzy says, it's just kind of giving a little bit more detail. I think what can sometimes be quite helpful is to kind of drill it down and then kind of bring it back out again and then drill it down in a different way, and just kind of try lots of kind of alternative ways of kind of saying the same pitch.
You both kind of mentioned how that one kind of jumped out at you a little bit. I mean, what did you notice first? Why was that special in that way?
So I think for me, this idea of solving a murder or preventing one was intriguing, but also a little bit confusing, which I think was the bit that would benefit from ironing out. Like, how with one touch can you solve a murder or prevent one? How does that actually manifest? But then that sense that what happens when her touch tells her she committed one, well, that's certainly interesting, because you get the impression she's committed a murder without knowing she's committed a murder. There's a question in it.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a question and a plot twist within that one line, isn't there?
Yeah. So just a bit more detail so that it feels grounded would be helpful, I think.
Well, there you go. That's some great advice there for putting a twist and questions in there. Always good. There's a few statements coming in that are all around the similar thing. So I'm gonna put them up on the screen. Lopi, hello to you. Thank you for your question. Says statement. I'm worried mine is too long, and Leah said the same. I wrote a paragraph, and so our pitch is supposed to be one line. So, if you are submitting, how does that work? Do you put a line, a paragraph as well, and how does that work?
I think You need to know what the one line is. And what I
Mhm.
always say to people is that bit where if you are pushing a book into a friend's hand, like to your mum or your sister or a mate, where you're like, you'll love this because what? Like, it's all about someone who discovers they kill someone when they touch someone, or, you know, what's the thing that you say about the books you love? Because it's never that long. When you recommend a book, you rarely kind of talk them through the plot or what would be the blurb on the back. It's normally a really succinct single line. It can be 2 lines, but you want it to be short and snappy. Does that feel right to you, Tash?
Yeah, I think, you want it to be something that's memorable. And, I think you've who was it? I think it was Juliet Mushins came and did a talk with us fairly recently, where she kind of said, a pitch should always try and get across the kind of character, setting, and conflict. And you don't need paragraphs to get that across. And so, I think people potentially sometimes kind of confuse a blurb, which is, the kind of marketing copy that's on the back of a book, which is kind of really meant to sort of, build a bit of a bigger picture about the story and the characters and how the two interact. Whereas the pitch is, you're really just trying to kind of get across the central dilemma of the story in that kind of, when this happens, X happens to Y.
Fantastic.
And it's there for TV drama. If you're recommending a new TV show to someone and you say, oh, it's called this, think about what that line is that you use for things that you are recommending and what someone will be saying about your story were they to recommend it in that way.
Yeah, it's quite a good one on the top of my head now. I'm thinking about Behind Her Eyes. Are you familiar with? Yeah, for example, I often said, basically the ending will basically blow your mind. So, for example, if I was putting that in there, would that be involved? Would I be prompted to put something like that in there?
You could say, like, with a totally unexpected ending, but what I would say that people use that a lot now, like you'll never see the ending coming.
Yeah,
so that feels a little bit overdone. And actually, I sometimes think the pitch should be the thing that will keep you reading from the beginning. So it will happen quite quickly when you start. It doesn't have to encompass your whole story. But once I've read chapter 1, why am I going to read chapter 2?
Yeah.
And your pitch should kind of answer that as well.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I think also, one book can have sort of several different pitches. And so you've got to kind of keep in mind the sort of intended audience and the genre that you're writing in. So, kind of as an example, I remember on a kind of course I went on once, we were asked to write different pitches for The Sound of Music. And there, you can turn that film into so many different types of story. It's hilarious. Obviously there's like singing nun, kind of rescues a family who have, kind of forgotten how to live. Or there's, like family escape the Nazis helped by, a convent of nuns, So there are kind of always kind of different ways of creating the pitch. It's about kind of creating a pitch that has the right message for what it is that you're trying to say about the book.